Nepal in Kathmandu, and especially warm welcome to those of you who are joining us around the world or catching up as well. I'm Ollie Barrett. My honor to be helping to host 2030 Insight Live with some fantastic guests. We are hot off the back of our opening ceremony with the Prime Minister of Nepal himself. And this session gives us great permission, actually, because it is starting with the word reflections. Reflections on global initiatives and legacies. So a chance to pause and think about what works, but also to weave some of those clues into the future as well. So thank you for joining us in the room. And thank you for being with us wherever you're joining from. Let me tell you who's here, because I'm going to introduce other guests to the stage as we go. Caroline Casey needs little introduction as the president of the IAPB, also as the founder of the Valuable 500 as well. And Caroline, I noticed you have recently returned from the Global Disability Summit, so I might be quizzing you about that in due course, so just to warn you. Sarati Dodson is sitting next to me. She is the Vice Chair of the International Trachoma Initiative. Welcome, Sarati. And also up here on the stage is Mario. Mario Bustos-Rubilar is a sensory function consultant within the WHO Regional Office for the Western Pacific. So please give them a round of applause for joining us here. Thank you, everybody. So I suppose how I think we should start, and I'll introduce two other guests, but most importantly, if you've got questions here, we'd like to know what they are. So I'm putting you on standby for that. But let me create a bit of space for some initial reflections, specifically on this huge topic, Sarati, the global fight against trachoma. I suppose if I could boil it down and give you a challenge, if you like, achievements and lessons for the future. So as you wish, staying where you are or from our podium. But Sarati, over to you for an initial reflection.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, excellent. Thanks so much, Ollie. It's lovely to see everybody in the room. I'm looking forward to having many chats with many of you over the next couple of days. Could I get my slides up, please? Thank you. So, as Ollie said, my name's Dr. Sarati Dodson. I'm the Director of Research and Evidence at the Fred Hollows Foundation and the incoming Vice Chair of the International Coalition for Trachoma Control. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the ICTC, we were established in 2004 as a multi-sector platform for collaboration with a membership comprising of 41 NGOs. And members including implementing partner organisations, research and academic organisations. And we also have 13 observer organisations, including donors, WHO and non-implementing partners that have an interest in the work of the ICTC and in trachoma programs. ICT implementing members currently work across 43 countries in all endemic WHO regions and work across a range of activities through this coalition to support national trachoma elimination plans. ICTC responds to calls for action and needs identified by health ministries in affected countries through the Get 2020 Alliance. And we were really excited to celebrate our 20th anniversary last year. Next slide. So the Global Trachoma Program provides one of the best buys in global health and an excellent example of global health, of what can be achieved when diverse stakeholders come together with a shared vision and a well-defined strategy to achieve common goals. Since 2002, the number of people at risk of trachoma globally has decreased by 93%. From 1.5 billion to 103 million as of 2024. Meanwhile, the number of people requiring surgery to treat trachoma trichiasis, the blinding stage of the disease, has dropped by 80%, from 7.6 million in 2002 to 1.5 million in 2024. So amazing achievements by the coalition of members. Behind these numbers lie several major initiatives, including more than 1.1 billion treatments of azithromycin donated by Pfizer through the International Trachoma Initiative, major partnership efforts to scale up WHO-endorsed SAFE strategy, and extensive mapping projects, such as the Global Trachoma Mapping Project, the GTMP, which at the time was the largest ever infectious disease survey, which collected data from 2.6 million people across 29 countries between 2012 and 2016. And the methodology that was developed for the GTMP continues to be used by Tropical Data, a service that has supported national programs in conducting over 4,000 surveys across 52 countries, examining more than 12 million people. And these efforts have so far contributed to 21 countries being validated as having eliminated trachoma as a public health problem. India, Pakistan, Vietnam having been the most recently validated countries in 2024. Back in 2011, the ICTC published the 2020 Insight, the End of Sight document. This resource was developed in partnership with our members and with health ministries, and provided a comprehensive overview of what we knew at the time, and equally importantly, what we didn't know about the global burden of trachoma. And over the last 2 years, ICTC has been working to update our understanding of the current funding gaps for trachoma programs. And in April 2025, so just a couple of weeks ago, we published our gap analysis report, Closing the Gap, estimating the investment required for the global trachoma elimination as a public health problem. So just to run you through some of the key stats. Our analysis estimates that as of February 2025, there's a gap of between $268 and $334 million required for surgery, antibiotics, surveys and trachoma research. Specifically, $105 to $140 million is required to support TT surgeries across 13 countries, and $91 to $121 million will be leveraged will leverage over $2 million in donated medicines by Pfizer by 2030. And $63 million is needed to support trachoma surveys between 2025 and 2030, and $8.7 to $9.8 million is needed to support high priority research projects. For those interested in reading our GAP report, you can access it via our website, and please let me know if you've got any questions. I'd be happy to engage with you about that. So just on to major challenges. So despite the immense progress that we've made across the many countries that are endemic for trachoma, there still remain several challenges, including funding, insecurity, persistence and recrudescence, and modified strategies to facilitate last mile delivery. But ICTC is confident that we will overcome these challenges, as we have overcome many of the challenges in the past, given the commitment of members and our strong collaboration. So that's all from me. Thank you. If you'd like any further information, please visit our website, come and speak to me, or you can email our project manager at the email address you can see on the screen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarati. So, Sarati, a couple of very quick follow-ups listening to that. You will have worked in some great collaborations over time. If you had to be immodest, what is an example of something that this coalition did exceptionally well that helped it to succeed?
Well, I think...
Now, I think we'll go on a handheld, if that's okay. Thank you, Caroline.
Wonderful. Well, one of the things that I've been discussing a lot with colleagues at this meeting and in the lead up to this meeting is the Global Trachoma Mapping Project. So one of the, I think, the key initiatives, and it was really an important foundational piece of work, conducting a massive round of surveys across 26 countries, capturing the needs of more than 12 million people, and collecting that data and establishing the methodology for those surveys has been been really, really pivotal for us to understand not only what the burden of disease is, but also what we need to do to respond to that burden.
Yes.
So we continue to use data as a way to bring ourselves together, to really target our efforts, and it provides the foundation of the work that the Coalition does.
Excellent. Final brief question. Go back to your former self as you began work with this coalition. Piece of advice, something well worth bearing in mind as you start.
Just develop the relationships and be patient with one another. Invest in the relationships between different partners. I think that's critical.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we'll have more questions for you, but for now, Dr. Sarah-Dodson, thank you very much indeed. We continue with another series of reflections. Mario, please, either from your seat or from the podium as you wish, help us to understand cataract surgery outcome monitoring, but particularly how you've driven quality through national systems. What have you learned?
I have some notes because I want to stay in my 5 minutes. I have also a presentation about cataract surgery outcomes monitoring in the Western Pacific. I am from WHO. In the Western Pacific region, we are 34 countries. And I will show you today two very inspiring situations in two countries that I want to share. Next slide, please. What is the situation in relation with cataracts in the Western Pacific? We have a big issue with cataracts because it's the leading cause of blindness in all the countries of the region. And it's uneven surgical coverage. Actually, only Malaysia in all the 34 countries meets some of the requirements for cataract surgery coverage in the region. But the last years we are having this, the targets from WHO, which is a concise way to monitoring the progress that we are having in cataracts coverage. And as you know, that is by 2030, we need to increase a 30% point of increase of effective cataract surgery coverage. And we have data, but we don't have enough. And that is unusual problems in all the regions. But the good news in the Western Pacific is that we have more data available these days, and there are many initiatives for different stakeholders that are progressing with this. Next slide, please. I will show you now the experience in two countries, and it's a different context, but as examples that you can do good progress in different scales depending of each country context. In the case, for example, of Malaysia, they have the lowest prevalence of blindness and low vision, is 0.5%, but Papua New Guinea has the highest prevalence of blindness and low vision with 7.3%. It's two countries from the region, but different realities. The cataracts prevalence in Malaysia is 2.6, in cataracts prevalence in Papua New Guinea is 7.3. And as you know what the situation is, Malaysia is a country with 34 million of people, and 6 million of them, they have over 60 years of age. As they say, and the Papua New Guinea is the most dense Pacific island country with 10 million of people, with 1 million of people over 50 years of age. And in relation with measuring the coverage, is not effective there, that is wrong. The coverage of cataract surgery coverage is 87 for Malaysia and 36 for Papua New Guinea. But what is the good thing? What is the good news? What is the inspiring thing here? Next slide, please. We have a big achievement from Malaysia, which is a country that has been working in monitoring the cataract surgery from a long time ago, from 1928, sorry. And they introduced several indicators and performance in a real time from 2006. That means that they have the national they have a key performance indicators, and they have the national eye database. And it's something that they are progressing and they are expanding in the country. And they have now a registry with outcomes like visual acuity, intraoperative complications, and patients' outcomes. And now, the good news, is that the country is having real-time data from individual, institutional, and national level. And in a recent publication, they compare some of the measures that they did in effective cataract survey coverage from 2014 and 2023. And they improve this measure in 2 regions of the country, to 13 to 19 and to 18 to 23% in the region of Eastern and Sarawak. It's a very big achievement, and probably this country will meet the target that we are having in WHO for the effective cataract survey coverage. And this is a very good news, and this is one reason is about measure and monitoring and surveillance. And the next good example is about Papua New Guinea. Next slide, please. We were there 1 year ago. Yeah. We met there in the country. And the country, if you read the research, it's very challenging to read that. It's like a very huge, massive, like a cataracts account, 90% of the blindness of PNG. They have a high inequality between men and women and geographical disparities. But considering that, the country is doing a major progress in system strengthening with the work integrated between the government and the national stakeholders. And how they are doing that? With the National Prevention of Blindness Committee, they have a very strong committee working coordinated with different stakeholders, with IPV, with WHO, with other NGOs, and group of professional organizations, and they have been progressing in a national health plan, and they are also include the mandatory cataract surgery rates in the country. Also, the country is having a national investment to improve the infrastructure. They're having a PNG Center of Eye Health in Port Moresby, and also they are measuring now the effective cataract surgery coverage, which is a good achievement in Papua New Guinea. Last slide, please. And the last reflection is we are in a momentum in the Western Pacific region, also probably globally. Malaysia has shown a strong experience about investment in a long term, always committed with the Ministry of Health and government. And Papua New Guinea is demonstrate that if they have a lot of challenges, also with coordination, they have a lot of progress. And I think that is something that we can learn from that. And we will keep supporting the countries and with WHO and also IPB in this mission that we have in these countries, but also in the rest of the Western Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mario. Quick question. You used the phrase on your slide, major progress on health system integration and data systems, so echoing Sarati's words. What above all else do you think has driven that progress, especially on that integration?
It's a good question, and I want to share a word that is very important, which is sustainability, and that is usually close to the government. And I think that for achieving that, the participation or the commitment from the government is essential. And no matter if the government is well equipped or not in providing the services, because once the government has this commitment, usually with the stakeholders, with the NGOs, with the agencies working in the country, they can progress. But yes, we need a leadership in the country, right, and that leadership needs to be done by the government.
Right, and one thing we've seen, thank you, Mario, one thing we've seen, Caroline, is this idea of leaders coming together to make commitments, and sometimes that happens in the form of a summit. And I know we're going to have a lot of conversation around summits over the next couple of days. You're returning from the Global Disability Summit, so without conducting a sort of wash up on the whole thing, what can we learn? What stood out about it? What was powerful? And where were you thinking, okay, this is change making here? What did you notice?
I noticed many things. But can I ask a question? Is there any chance we could dial down those lights just because of my condition? I look like I'm crying and I'm not. I just want to say that. Okay, so first things, because we are talking very much about where we are within our mission around Insight Live and this talk around campaigning and summiting. The Global Disability Summit that was in Berlin just at the beginning of April was a really interesting case study for what we can achieve even in a world that is really complex and difficult. Yeah. And also coming from the background that I come from, in having built the valuable 500, which was a huge radical collaboration. But the Global Disability Summit was 3 years in the making. So first of all, the reflection is we need to give that time to build up momentum, like step by step by step. Big gatherings of summits or high-level meetings don't just happen as a once-off. You have to build a very strong pathway with a lot of moments that people can attach to. You're not going to get 193 heads of state to agree to something in one moment, and certainly not in this geopolitical climate, but if you build over a period of time. So that was the first thing. The second part that is huge is ensuring that the voice of the people to whom we are working with, we are serving, are part of the design of everything we do. So there's an expression in the disability community, nothing about us without us. And that is incredibly important in designing anything that is going to deliver a global success or a systemic change. And I would say the disability community were very much part of what the governments of Jordan and Germany went to design. One of the greatest impacts that came out of this was the Amman-Berlin Declaration. So when the government of Germany and Jordan, when they agreed to hold this summit with IDA, which is the International Disability Alliance, they were very mindful. They didn't want to have a summit schmummit, right? They didn't want to have a whole just list of commitments that we're not accountable for, right? Because there's nothing worse. There's nothing more deflating than coming to something and you see the commitments and we all shout and then 3 years later they're gone. So there's an accountability framework being built into the next Global Disability Summit, which will be in Qatar, and that will be in 2028. And aside from that, what the King of Jordan wanted and the Chancellor of Germany, they set us a task to have something that was really meaningful for heads of state, and this is where the Amman-Berlin Declaration came from. And what that was is that we had to promise, or whoever was to endorse it, that all of the development cooperation would have 15% of those programs were specific to disability inclusion. Now, can I just tell you, at the moment where the world is, the idea that that could even happen was absurd. And so what they hoped was 20 countries. And they thought that would be great, and that's heads of state signing this declaration, which has an accountability framework to it. 6 days before the summit, we got 60.
Amazing.
Right? And then, on the day of the summit, we ended at 97. Now, that is no mean feat.
Phenomenal.
In something like Inclusive Development Corporation, for the heads of state, ministers of finance, and to stand to accountability for 3 years.
Thank you, Caroline. Well, I'm going to remind our guests that we'll be opening for questions as we go through. Here's a question. As the team plan towards 2028, they say to you in a corridor, Caroline, how do we raise the bar for that next summit? What would you really coach them to really push on?
Look, I think I said it. I mean, I was quite quiet for Caroline in the opening part, but now I can do my badass personality, which is genuinely what is in this sector that very few sectors have. So much work has been done. You know, when we talk about you go to Everest, the base can't work. We're already there. So now, the only thing stopping us is getting the people who are negative out of our way, and it is our radical collaboration in a very clear North Star focus that serves us all, as well as individually doing your work. But the only way that we are going to punch through this system and hold this space is that we all commit to the thing that combines us, the things that bring us together, so that we are that absolutely unstoppable voice. But you must have the data, and that's why I talk about the spine. We have to have the data, we have to have the science, we have to have the heart, we have to have the ambition, but the egos need to leave the room.
100%. Check your ego at the door. Thank you, Caroline. Here's to that. Now let's bring in two more guests. Let's ask Gail and Louisa to come to the stage. I'll introduce you properly when you get here. But as Gail Grant and Louisa Syret come to the stage, please give them a round of applause. Welcome both. colleagues will recognize both of our newest guests. Gail, who joins next to Caroline, works as an External Affairs Director for the Intercontinental Region for AbbVie. Forgive me, you're at the end there, Gail. Sorry, there you are. A global biopharmaceutical company, as you know, whereas Louisa is the Head of Gender Advocacy and Engagement at the Fred Hollows Foundation. Good to see you, Louisa. So I thought that I'd sort of be quite specific, if that's all right, on specific initiatives and coalitions, if that's all right. So Gail, and I'm picking on a bit of your work. I know it's much broader than this. The Diabetic Eye Conditions Coalition launched last year. So this was a call to action for policymakers in particular across Europe and globally. But I suppose the million-dollar question is, what does it show us about the role of industry working in partnership with stakeholders, turning advocacy into meaningful policy change? So that's where I'd like to put the pin.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so thank you, everybody. The Diabetic Eye Coalition, just to put it in context, is really a piece of work that has an ambition to ensure that eye health is a key pillar of diabetic health strategies, both globally and nationally. Because I think that the success of any coalition or organizational event, as we've heard from others, is having that political leadership. And I think where you have political leadership and political understanding of the issue, then you can drive real change. So countries around the world have diabetes. They recognize the public health challenge of diabetes. They know it's a time bomb of a health condition, and they have developed strategy. Eye health is not that far down the policy journey in many countries, so by aligning ourselves into ensuring that patients with diabetes are guaranteed that eye health support that they need throughout their journey. So that's the premise for the coalition. And it's a coalition in partnership with the IAPB, so it's obviously a great coalition, and any member welcome. But I think what really works is we've got the scientific knowledge because we develop treatments that support improvements in patient outcomes through innovation. So what the best thing we can do as an industry partner is to bring the stakeholders together. So in the case of the coalition, we brought together global experts in eye health, and we asked them, what are the issues? What is the big challenge that we need to address in order to be successful? So the calls to action that are available on the IAPB website are based on a consensus view. They're not the view of a company, an organization, or an individual. They are a shared consensus. And it is 5 key asks. It's not complex. And the important thing is that these asks are the core thread of everything we do. So we're now building evidence that will add weight, make the case for change, both internationally and nationally, for each of those calls to action. So that's what we bring.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. And just very quickly then, to what extent does that coalition contain additional private sector members?
Well, at the moment, as I say, we're open to new members.
Yes.
It's not an exclusive AbbVie club.
Yeah.
Any company is very welcome.
Brilliant.
A partnership of all. Because
Thank you.
I'll maybe answer that next point in my next question.
Totally.
So,
because my follow-on was more around this sense of what you're already beginning to learn about maintaining momentum, because Caroline talks about this series of moments, and fantastic to have this great milestone, some initial progress, but how do you keep that going?
So for us, and my experience working in public health policy is momentum is where you focus on your key asks. You don't deviate. You just keep on at the same message. I often say government affairs advocacy is just the art of repetition until a government repeats it for you. So that's my approach to advocacy. But I would say what is really important in making that momentum real is that where we have all the stakeholders together, and it can be as broad a church as possible, if we all ask for the same thing, it's very easy for a government to say, okay, we can do that. But if every every organisation in the eye health sector is asking for a different thing, government doesn't know what to do about that.
Yeah.
So this is where the coalition and momentum gathers weight.
Yeah, 100%. So, Louisa, I think it really helps us when we hear how, and there's a great example there, how some of these initiatives come to life in the first place. So let's pick on a couple, or I think we'll go towards the latter, the UN resolution on vision, but also the UN Women and Fred Hollows Foundation initiative. So major milestones getting eye health recognized really as a gender equality issue and a development issue. How did they come to be? Because we can see them up in lights, but I want to hear the backstory. We'll swap mics with Gail.
We're working
well
now.
done. Thank you so much.
So I'm going to focus more so on the gender equality in the UN Women Policy Brief, if that's okay. The UN resolution called on the eye health sector to integrate across the whole of the UN multilateral agencies. And within the Fred Hollows Foundation, we have expertise in gender equity. We've been working in gender equity for such a long time that we decided to, working with the Gender Equity Work Group within IAPB, to lead this approach. And so for those in the room that aren't aware, repetition, eye health is a gendered issue. So across the world, of the 1.1 billion people in the world with vision loss, 55% are women and girls, and that's why it's so important that we partnered with an agency like UN Women. So I'll take you through the steps. The first thing was knowing our target, knowing our audience, and we were 100% clear that that was UN Women. So then we went into a research phase, internal and external. So what are the strengths of us, of the sector? What evidence do we have? What have we done? What have we changed? But I think more importantly, what are the priorities for UN Women, and how do we, as an eye health sector, help them to achieve what they want to achieve? I think key is making ourselves relevant to them and helping them to achieve their goals. So our third step was to make the approach always scary. You've done all the research, you think you've got the argument. So we then mapped out who did we know. It's not about what you know, sometimes it's about who you know. So we looked out, and it turned out that our former CEO had worked with one of the key stakeholders, an executive director at UN Women. So with great trepidation, we sent the email, we pressed send, and we thought, oh goodness. And actually we got a response within a couple of days, which in itself was outstanding because she is a very senior woman within UN Women. And that's not to say that our former CEO wasn't loved and remembered, but busy people. So we also then had to make sure there was resource available. And we have a wonderful partnership with the Australian government, and they were very supportive of this approach. So at that point, we had the money, we had the connection, we then needed to win that connection over. So the particular person who'd responded, she said, yes, this is great, and she handed us over to a staff member. And so then I'm very pleased to say my big boss is sitting in the room, Jennifer Gersbeck. And Jennifer and I sat on a number of calls with the individual from UN Women. Yeah. And it was good. They were listening to us and they were nodding and they were saying, yes, this is interesting. But I think this is where it comes to, don't ever underestimate the power of face-to-face. And Jennifer happened to be in the United States, finishing her fellowship at Harvard, and she had the opportunity to sit down face-to-face with UN Women and have the conversation. Yes. And all kudos to Jennifer, I have to say, because she was put on the spot. Yeah. And she was asked, and again, this comes back to UN Women are a busy agency. All these UN agencies have their own agendas, they have their own priorities. Why should they focus on eye health? And Jennifer was asked this in such a binary format of why, if I have the Cancer Coalition coming to me, why should I pick eye health over cancer? That's pretty tough on the spot. So Jennifer talked, and please ask Jennifer about this later because I'm paraphrasing. It's horrific that she's there, sitting there. But basically, Jennifer made the the argument around eye health being a key golden thread of the SDGs, making the argument about how it affects girls from school, women in work, older women, every part of life course, and it touches all of those SDGs. So SDG 4 on education, SDG 8 on livelihoods, climate change, all of them.
So this is fascinating, and in fact, if we with the team, let's get a mic down to Jennifer, because I'd love to put you on the spot, Jennifer. Can we have a round of applause for Jennifer Gusbeck, everybody? Because can you remember, and I really am, you'll kill me afterwards for this, but can you remember an example of almost like an aha moment where you're communicating with someone and for the first time possibly they say, I get it? Where does your mind go back to?
My mind goes back to sitting in that cafe with our contact Nazanin in UN Women, and she did ask the hard questions, and I expect her to ask the hard questions. But you're right, Louisa, I did talk about the golden thread going through SDGs, but I think the aha moment was Nazanin's role at UN Women is around health and HIV/AIDS. And rightly, it had been shoved into the health section of UN Women. And I think the aha moment for Nazanin was that I pointed out that eye health is not just a health issue, it's a social, economic and development issue, then talked about the impacts as Louisa has outlined. And that for her was an aha moment. She said, I'd never thought of it like that. And she realised that this was a critical issue that needed to be tackled and something that UN Women should be focusing on.
Amazing. The light bulb came on. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Louisa, I don't know, I interrupted to throw there, but I've got lots more questions. Did you want to carry on for now, or shall I come back?
The only other thing I'd say is be prepared for seriously difficult contracting, because multilateral agencies, apologies who, do not compromise on their contracting. Yep. So you need to be prepared to compromise on your contracting requirements. 100%.
All right. So I will put you on the spot, since I put Jennifer on the spot, Louisa. Anything you thought would be easy, but turned out to be hard?
Contracting.
Who told you that would be easy? Okay. All right. So I've got lots more questions, and same for you, Gail. But very quickly, why don't we just get others in? Because Sarah, help us to zoom out a bit and think about the role and the power of coalitions more broadly. What does what you've learned boil down to?
Coalitions can have an amazing impact. I think I'm so excited by what we've been able to achieve as a trachoma community. A 93% reduction in the prevalence of trachoma over the course of a decade or so. It's amazing what you can do if you come together and have a shared vision and you work collaboratively together, troubleshoot, and persistently work towards a shared goal.
And just in terms of the breadth of the coalition, is there anyone that, had you not been thinking clearly, you might have left out? In other words, those important but potentially overlookable allies.
I think probably donors were kind of late to come into the partnership as true partners. I think that we probably saw donors as stakeholders rather than true partners in the early stages of the coalition, but they're now true allies and partners.
And when you say donors, just...
So funders,
yeah.
those
of
that
all
are
types,
of all types.
Not just philanthropists.
No.
Yeah, okay.
Government,
Yeah.
all sorts of donors. Yeah.
And very briefly, Caroline, what have you learned? And I'll come back to Gail on this, about bringing in private sector allies when some of them, I don't mean to cast aspersions, certainly not about anyone in this hall, might look at each other with a little bit of initial suspicion, because in the field they might even compete. And you're bringing them into something bigger.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's no doubt the private sector has a particular flavour of their own, except I'm going to say in building the Valuable 500, I mean, we're talking about the 500 of the world's biggest CEOs of the biggest brands. Can you imagine bringing the CEO of Google, Microsoft and Apple on the same stage? We did it, right?
Well, only one person's managed it since, but we won't mention it.
Well, absolutely not, thank you. Do not put me in the same category. But what I'm trying to say is, remember the people that work in these businesses. And I think it's something really interesting. Can I just say that rinse and repeating is so important? Yep. But it's also the people that work in these companies, never forget that they actually have a genuine desire and heart to do things. So yes, there's the contracting and the laws that competition and the legals and the PRs and the brands, but it's actually the human beings in the companies who truly want to get things done. And how in the private sector we get around that competition is finding something that the people in those competing companies can connect with that goes way above the competition. And more importantly, is a lift for everyone. Right. And in big issues like eye health or disability, the issue is so broad and so big, and there's so much cake to eat, that actually for us to work together to get everybody a piece of cake with the right people driving it is how we've got around it.
Yeah, and just on that, Gail, what are you already learned, what have you learned about the power of these public-private partnerships?
Well, on the first point around competitors working with each other, pharmaceutical companies compliantly do have working groups where, you know, in the UK there's about 4 or 5 companies that have formed an industry vision group where we focus on policy reform. It's not about the treatments that we market, it's about the environment that we operate in. So there is no limit to what we can achieve if we work together. And I think certainly my experience is the value is always added when we bring in the medical societies, the patient organisations, the NGOs. They bring not just their expertise and credibility, but they bring the insight so that we can make sure that we are all working towards either the enhancement of science, the improvement of healthcare delivery, or improved outcomes for patients, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, it's super powerful. So we'll get more reflections, because I suppose my question to our audience online and in the hall is, what's resonated? What would you have said if you'd joined us on stage? What's not been said as well? Before we go open for questions, Mario, it seems quite, in some views, overly simplistic to see the role of government as simply policy change. Mm-hmm. Government has a much broader role to play. What have you learnt about that broader role?
Oh, yes, I think it's the policy making is a big area, but I think it's governments is involved in everything at the end, and they also can be involved with the private sector. It's like it's not something that is only policy. Also they need to be involved in all the levels of interaction, especially in the initiatives that we are having, for example, in the specs or in the cataracts. They need to have a role in all the areas, but that is complicated because in many cases they don't have enough capacities. And that is the time that we go in as international organizations, NGOs, and other partners trying to be involved in that area. But yes, generally governments work in different levels more than policy.
Yeah, and just on that question, team on the panel, would anyone else add to where you've seen a specific example of government playing what turns out to be a very effective role? What have you seen? What were they doing? I just invite any thought on that. Louisa, have you got something?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that our partnership with the Australian government and through the ANCP funding that allowed us to bring this policy brief to life was outstanding. And the legacy of the policy brief, you know, we launched it on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. That's no mean feat, and you only do that when you have a co-sponsor of a government, you know, the Australian government there sitting next to you. We were also then able to launch it in Vietnam with the support of the Australian representatives in Vietnam as well. And I think what the Australian government and UN Women really love about the policy brief, if I'm going to be immodest, to quote you before, Ollie, was that it is the first ever global consultation of women about eye health ever done. 170 women across the world, across all 5 regions of UN Women, were consulted. And so when we talk about this policy brief, when we take it out to people, it's not, you know, the Western people, the global North, however you want to describe it. It's not us imposing recommendations out. It is the voice of women and girls with lived experience, with understanding of eye health and how it affects them day to day, speaking out and telling us what they need to happen.
Yeah. And I don't expect us to name the government. Is there anything that you've seen governments do that, whilst trying to be helpful, frankly, had the opposite effect, got in the way? And of course, Caroline Casey, I'm slightly side-eyeing you with a view to a contribution.
I'm not going to answer that question, actually, because it's live.
But
No
what sort of activity do you only wish you knew?
No way, but because also, actually, I'm not here to criticize, but could I just give 2 or 3 things, if the things that aren't said?
Yeah.
When you do coalition work, you can't take no personally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really hard. Coalition work is hard. And I think the other thing about it is treating people with dignity and respect and kindness. And please, I'm not trying to make this easy. It's actually very difficult to work with people. But coalitions work because people choose to work together towards a common goal with respect and also a sense of joy and fun, right? I know all of the work that we've done, right? We have had you enjoy working with people. That's something we never really speak about, is that the way we are with each other is very important. And then very lastly, I think when you build a coalition, is it sometimes has to change direction and not being wedded to only one particular outcome, but being willing to kind of adjust with each other.
Right, so I'm putting you all on the spot. Has anyone got an example for us of where you have had to tack or pivot, change direction? Because we want to learn these lessons. Will anyone lead us somewhere on that change? Gail.
With relation to the Diabetic Eye Coalition, I think when we speak to governments, we know, we learned this through work in other disease areas, but increasingly, health departments need permission from finance departments in order to invest. So really we had to think about, going beyond the health argument. And we've heard this repeatedly already this week. We have to prove the economic and personal consequence of not taking action to provide that financial argument that will resonate with the Treasury Minister, because I think we have to influence those who influence the decision makers. Yeah. And if the decision makers are finance, we need to be financial about it.
Yeah, Maria, and then Louisa. Maria, then Louisa, because I'm coming back to you as well, Louisa.
Oh. Sorry. I just wanted to reflect actually on the breakfast meeting we had this morning and the geopolitical environment. So our breakfast meeting was Blinded by Bias, how the changes and the backlash against women's rights affect us. And it was wonderful, again, to see Jennifer stand up and pledge the foundation and also IAPB's continued commitment to DEI. And in terms of swerving and nodding, I think there's the continued commitment there, but we may just adjust our wording sometimes. Yeah. Just a different flavour, a different way of approaching how we talk about it, but the commitment remains firm. And I think that's so important at this particular time.
Yes, thank you.
I just want to speak not about bad experience with countries, because we work for them, and in that case it's difficult to speak about that. But I want to be in that side from the governments, because usually the eye sector is involved in NCDs, in non-communicable diseases. And in that case, for countries, it's many complicated to understand the importance to integrate eye health in the sector, in the government. And in that case, I think that one good experience from WHO at least is try to, because one important thing in eye health is that it's very easy to show the benefits, the revenues, how cost-effective each measure is. That is when you have the correct meeting, the correct discussion with the correct policymakers. You say, this probably eye health is the most evident way to see very good results with so cheap interventions.
Yes.
And if you have that and you put numbers on the table and you say, look at this, and we can do a sustainable program working with this funding, supporting this section in the government, they think, oh, this is really important and it's time for a change.
Right, so exactly on that point, Louisa, if we come back to that sense, because we've talked about, shifting narratives, but adjusting language. When you're boiling it down to tangible impacts, especially on the initiatives you've talked about, how are you answering that question, but particularly how that translates to lasting change?
Yeah, I think a policy brief that you design and it looks pretty and you do nothing with collects dust and achieves nothing. So we are, indeed. So with breaking news, yesterday at the Gender Equity Work Group, the whole work group endorsed a new approach that we're going to take, which is a collective action approach. And so we are mapping, starting off tomorrow, we are going to start mapping the policy brief against the work that's already happening across the sector. Yeah. We're going to follow that through for a couple of years. The initial mapping will highlight where the gaps are, where the opportunities are. As a sector, we're going to respond to that in a collective action systems leadership format. And at the end of 2-3 years, yet to be determined, we will have an amazing report that talks about your backbone, your point of the backbone, not just your backbone. It will talk about data, it will talk about case studies, it will talk about learning. And what I'm really excited about, and I know that the post-2030 agenda 2045 seems a long way away, but if we can get eye health into the post-2030 development agenda, and the report based on the UN Women Policy Brief is a small part of the data that feeds into our ability to have eye health as indicators in that next development framework, then what a legacy that will be for the future of eye health.
Yeah, first class. So we've got a few more minutes together, but can I ask our guests here in Nepal to give a round of applause for our guests for being so pithy and valuable in their reflections. Thank you. You might want to share something you wish had been said, something that was really struck a chord. You don't have to say who you are, but you can if you'd like to. If you raise your hand if you've got a contribution, I think you're filming there. I've sold lots at auction for less than that. But if you raise your hand, I will come to you. Why don't we come right down to the front row here? Thank you to colleagues. And the mic's just coming round to you now. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I was just interested, I had a question for you all as a policy person working on these asks. We had a recent success in Australia with a coalition ask, and part of the success, I think, was based on the fact that the minister wanted something to announce, and we put it in the right place at the right time. And I just wanted to ask you, to what extent do you think timing plays a part in success, and do you have any advice on picking your moment?
What a cracking first question, right. So we're looking around. Gail, do you want to tuck in, and others, please welcome. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, my background is political PR, so I love this question. So yeah, I think it's timing, it's everything, but actually it's the relationship and trust that you build over years with the political party or the government, the special advisors, the civil servants. The civil servants outlast ministers, so they are often a point of contact. So it's about establishing that, I would say, is more important than hoping you hit the right time. But there's always, there's key points in a political calendar that we know that they're desperate to talk about something positive. So in the case of maybe Australia, sorry, I'm assuming you're from Australia. Yeah. Post-election, they're going to want to announce something in 100 days, so you have that in your schedule.
And Caroline, I'm going to bring you in almost immediately. But Gail, just to follow on that point, we have hopefully vaguely medium-term planning. Some ministers will have their grid. What have you learned about sheer opportunism?
Oh, well, I think opportunism it's not the same in every parliament, but in the UK, where my political experience is where there's parliamentary debates, open questions, where there's these opportunities, that's again another opportunity to get your issue, your brand, your name into that debate through the trusted relationships you own.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. Caroline?
I love this question. Thank you, Jonathan. And I also completely agree with Gail, but when it comes to government, it's the civil servants who are consistently in power and the relationships that need to be built over time so that you can grab that opportune moment. However, I want to give you one thing that I have learned over the years. We often wait for the perfect moment, the perfect time, and we hold back, right? And there's a great quote called, "Forget your perfect offering. It's the cracks where the light gets in." And I just want to say 3 weeks ago, I stood in a room and we got 30 signatures on the spot because it was just a moment when it wasn't perfect. So it's just keeping your eyes and ears open for those.
Thank you, Caroline. Jonathan, did you want to reflect on those answers?
No, just to say thank you very much to, very good, helpful answers about not waiting. Yes.
Thank you. Other questions, comments, reflections? If you raise your hand. I had a question I wanted to come back to Sarity on, actually, but unless we can see others in the room, and I will go online as well. Sarity, you've got some incredible numbers there, 93% reduction. What have you learned around the boldness of stating a numerical goal?
Oh, it's been absolutely critical for the trachoma work in a whole range of ways. So I talked earlier about the importance of data. We have found that having those numbers and being able to demonstrate them going up or going down has been really critical for the engagement that we've been able to secure.
And I'm not splitting hairs, but that's the transparency of showing the data in real time.
Yep.
I'm talking about in advance, sticking one's neck out and saying, this is what we're heading for.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So at the Get to 2020 Alliance, having WHO set a very concrete, clear target and having that be really endorsed by the partners has been critical. And I think reflecting on some of the discussion earlier about being able to pivot, us having a very clear and concrete numerical target that we were working towards has allowed us to be agile in the way that we go about achieving that. We can troubleshoot, we can come together, we can find novel solutions, we can respond to all sorts of ongoing challenges, whether it's USAID cuts or COVID or what have you. But knowing and agreeing together what we're trying to achieve has been absolutely critical.
Fab. Thank you. I'm scanning for questions and observations and reflections. So here's a conundrum for all of you. You're bringing together, and I'm going to call it a physical meeting now, but of really different people, as in different types of organization. They might speak different languages in work speak, but also literally. They might be of very different dispositions, except you've got to try and help them get on. Because if your coalition don't, get on, then you're not going to progress. What have you learned about how you bring very different allies, sometimes unlikely allies, together in a way that works? And you can be as practical as you like, or big picture. Louisa.
So I think that it's firstly about a common goal, making sure that everybody knows what the common goal is, so that no matter the differences, no matter the arguments, the temperaments, the whatever it might be, you can come back to what it is that's driving us forward. Yep. But to Caroline's point as well, you have to make it fun. You have to make it fun. There has to be some joy of why you want to work together and why you want to make it happen.
So
because
where's your mind going back to, Louisa? Because these are serious topics, and yet, yes, you say you have to make it fun. How has that worked in your favour?
Well, I think you have to enjoy what you're doing, make the most of it, make the most of the opportunities. It's okay to relax. Tonight we've got a moment out on the garden. We're going to share a beverage together and talk and chat. And that's really important because you can get bogged down in the detail, the data is absolutely phenomenally important. But you've got to lift yourself back up again sometimes and just see what you're aiming towards. So
Caroline, you have to make it fun, even when you're dealing with a blue chip CEO?
No. Can I just, if you want me to, I'm going to give an honest answer. You know what really stops this progress is this move for perfection, analysis paralysis stuff. But the biggest thing, when somebody leads with confidence, because you know how much we all yearn as human beings to make change happen. Never, like, that's what I said when I was opening, don't underestimate, we're human beings here trying to do it. And I think there's a need and a desire that if you want to make really tough stuff happen, it's leading and saying, we're going to do this together as humans. We're all in this room here together for that, and never underestimate that power. And so blue chip companies have CEOs who are also mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, people, human, friends. Remember that. And I keep always going back to we're human beings doing human work for the human citizenship. That's what we are, human beings.
100%. Thank you. Sarah,
I just want to echo those points and talk about the importance of these sorts of meetings, because with COVID and all of the move to do things online, I think we have to argue harder for these face-to-face get-togethers, but they are so critical. Those relationships, if I think about the trachoma community, we see ourselves as a community. We work together very closely. We have deep relationships that have been invested in over a long period of time. And it is these sorts of face-to-face meetings that really do allow us to deepen those friendships and those relationships and have fun together, all towards a common goal. And it just is so critical.
So just to add, I think it's actually really valuable to be challenged in coalitions, and I think it's really important that we take on board challenge as part of the development process. Otherwise, we're just talking to ourselves and we're not really hearing different perspectives. So I think we should have challenging conversations, but they should be done with respect and a bit of joy. But I think it's part of the process. But if we start with the end in mind, those challenges are really just opinions about how we can best get there. And sometimes you can create gold.
To disagree agreeably.
Hello? Oh, now. I just want to add also, in some conversations, difficult one when we have different people from different places, is that the inequality that we have in the table, usually people like from the South or from the North, that they are giving us something, and we need to change that perspective during the conversation, and a good way to do that is to being human beings, but also to understand what is happening in the room, like who are them, and for that reason you need to learn a little more before, usually, what is the culture about. It's bad to do a stereotype, but they are very useful in social work. And in that case, you need to learn, with people from Asia, you need to speak in some way. With people from Latin America, to speak with Latinos, you need to dance. Or, I don't know, some stuff, you can put all the people in the same page. And that is difficult at the beginning when you have, for example, donors with people who will receive some provision of service. Usually people feel that, feeling of not equality, and in that case we need to be in the same page, and for doing that we need to be human beings.
To be human beings, I love. So we're going to go just into our final few minutes. If there are what's not been said, what would you like to ask, or a point you'd like to put to the room? Now's your chance. What about, here's a nightmare scenario, you do some amazing work on a coalition, right? But actually, you look back and you go, such a shame, because that progress petered out. So let's just have some final reflections on legacy, okay? And let's say leaving it to chance and hope and faith isn't enough. What have you embedded into what you've been doing to increase the chances of a lasting legacy, not for you personally, but for the work that you've been doing? Would anyone give us some advice on that? Because we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't reflect on that. I'm going to start at this end, if that's all right, and then others, please come in. Sarati. Sarati.
In terms of legacy, I think making sure that we are kind of bringing people along on the journey. One of the things that we've had lots of discussions, for example, with our donor partners is the importance of kind of sustainable impact. So they have invested so much funds, so much time over the past decade or so in the trachoma program, and we've had to convince them, sometimes the hard way, that they need to continue to invest post the big achievements in order to see those sustainable impacts, because there is the chance that things will regress. And so making sure that we're really thinking about sustainable impact and making sure we're bringing them along.
Do you mind me asking, what's convincing a donor the hard way?
Just lots of conversations and showing them examples of where things have gone backwards.
Right, almost that warning, that warning flag there.
Exactly.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Forgive me. Yeah. Final reflections on legacy. It doesn't have to be everybody. Caroline.
Thank you. There's a thing when we start to make big change happen. It's like a life cycle, isn't it? When you start and you're in that catalyst phase and you're driving it, and then you're against everything, and then you achieve it, and then it plateaus out there. The biggest thing about leaving legacy, there are different people required to start or to implement or to build momentum.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important things is knowing when it's your time to give up your seat, to let somebody else with different talents take it on.
That is a brilliant point and a huge question as well. Any final comments on legacy? Louisa?
Yeah, I was going to say collective action. Learn to delegate. Make sure that there's not one person, although you might have an amazing, clear leader, that sets the scene and sets the tone. You need a group working right across it, and I think that's been the strongest thing that I've been learning through the Gender Equity Work Group, is to make sure that we've got subgroup leaders, we've got other people that are responsible for driving our activation plan, and it's not just falling to leadership.
Because it just reminds us, when you think, the definition of a catalyst is that the reaction continues when the catalyst is removed.
So that's not what I'm going to talk about.
David, Louisa's got me thinking.
So I think, we just launched the Diabetic Eye Coalition last year, so at the moment we're growing that coalition, but at the same we had meeting in Mexico, we had meeting in Europe, but what we are doing is rolling it out into national audiences. So within our business, our Italian colleagues have used it, our Spanish colleagues have used it to raise eye health up their parliamentary agenda, and we're looking to hold a meeting in China later this year. So we're trying to create that national action that will maintain the momentum of the ambition of the coalition.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm going to say two thank yous. One, for the work that you do, and two, for being so open and for sharing so brilliantly on our stage today. Will you join me in thanking all of our guests very much indeed? Thank you all.